what I was talking about in the last segment is that, most of the inauthentic women in our society want either a doormat or a dominator. Because, again, they're in one form of brain imbalance or another. The vast majority of them are being conditioned to the left brain imbalance because that's masculinizing the woman. And it's also getting the woman to align her so-called values to the state and its so-called values. Put all this stuff in quotation marks, folks. And again, you could put the word woman in quotation marks. So, maybe that'll make it a little bit more palatable. I'm not really talking about a real woman here. You got to understand that. Every time I'm using the term woman when I connect it in with the neo-feminist agenda, you have to understand I mean the inauthentic, mind-controlled woman that has nothing to do with what a real woman is at all. Zero. And unfortunately, the inauthentic woman comprises the vast majority of women in our population. Yes, that is a generalization, but it is a true generalization. The social engineers have done their job well, and they know what they're doing, and they know how to do it. This is done through movies, television, magazines, media, the news, the daily news that people absorb. You just look through society, and I'm telling you right now, all you have out there is television watchers, folks. You got people who sit in front of that garbage device day in and day out, rotting their brain, and they think it's telling them something that resembles truth. The genuine being, the genuine human being, the genuine man, the genuine woman is not involved in any aspect of the game of control, whether on the side of being a dominator or being a doormat. And no genuine man or woman would want somebody to play either one of those roles. A real relationship involves control not being involved in it. And unfortunately, that's what modern day relationships have all become about. Control. But I have a question I want to ask the listening audience. I've done a social experiment over the last several weeks on my own time, where I asked approximately 75 people, 75 individuals, this question that I'm going to pose to a caller blindly right now. Okay? And I won't tell you what the results are. Okay? Let's actually go to the phone line so I could pose this question, and I'll tell you a little bit more about the social experiment that I did. Let's hear from Phil in Oregon. Phil, I know you may have called in to pose some other question, but I want you to hold off on that question for now, and I want to ask you a question, okay? And if you still have a question or a comment that you want to make, I'll bring you back on later, okay? You could hold, and I'll bring you back in. But I'd like to pose a question blindly to you, and could you just confirm I haven't asked you this question, have I?
No, I'm kind of excited.
Okay, we didn't talk at all or pre-rehearse this in any way, okay? I'm just bringing Phil in because he's the first in the call queue, and I just want to ask you something, okay? I've asked 75 people so far this question, all right, as a social experiment. In a modern-day interaction between a male and a female, after the social niceties and pleasantries are exchanged at first, could you tell me the first question invariably that the woman poses to the man in that interaction?
Oh, man. Let me think.
Almost invariably, the first question that a woman in modern society will pose to a man after, the general pleasantries are exchanged, like, what's your name, where are you from, what's the next question that comes up?
Oh, I got it.
Go ahead.
What do you do for demon coin slavery points?
Thank you, Phil. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this deeply, deeply explains the dynamic that I'm talking about here. Okay? Phil, I'm going to let you go. I want to thank you for giving that answer, okay? And I want to tell people the result of this experiment. If you want to hold on the line, you're welcome to do that, and I'll bring you on for a question or comment after when I go to the phones, if I go to the phones. But thank you. Thank you for allowing me to ask you that question blindly. Okay.
Thank you.
So, of course, the answer to that question is, what do you do for a living? What do you do to make money? Okay, that's the first question. Now, that's person 76 that I've posed that question to in the last several weeks. And I'll tell you the result of that little social experiment on the other side of this break. Ladies and gentlemen, you are listening to What on Earth is Happening. Stay with us. Now, before this last break, I think we've hit people with something that is a cornerstone in what I'm trying to explain. And I want to thank Phil from Oregon from answering my question live on the air blindly, okay, not knowing what I was going to ask. And the question was, and I've done a social experiment with this over the last several weeks, and I've posed this question to 75 people. Phil was number 76. And the question was, in an interaction in the modern world between a man and a woman who have just met each other, after they, if they're talking and they exchange pleasantries at the very beginning of the conversation, what is invariably the first question that the female will pose to the male in that interaction? And he answered, "What do you do for a living?" He worded it a little bit more colorfully. He said, "What do you do for demonic coin of the realm?" or something to that effect, for fake fiat Federal Reserve notes, But essentially the question remains the same. What is the occupation that you make money doing? Okay? Now, this being the primary foremost question that is posed, what does that say about what is going on in the modern conditioned female mind? Well, we'll get into that in a minute, but let me give you the results of my little social experiment that I've conducted here over the past few weeks. 100% of people that I posed that question to, 76 out of 76, answered the same way. What do you do for a living? 100%. Now, ladies and gentlemen of the listening audience, okay? If I went out on the street corner here in South Philadelphia, and I went on the corner and I just said, I posed the question to 100 people as they walked by, could you please tell me what color the sky is on a cloudless, weatherless day? During the day, when not at nighttime, but during the day, on a cloudless, weatherless day, what color is the sky? What color does the sky refract to the human eye? I will almost guarantee you that you will not get 100% of people to answer with the word blue. I will almost guarantee it. Yet 100% of people, you know how difficult it is to get 100% agreement on any question? I mean, you go out on the street corner and ask people, what planet is this that you are standing on? I guarantee you 100% of people won't respond with the Earth. I will almost guarantee it. As crazy as that sounds, trust me, you will find somebody that will give a different answer. To get 100% agreement on asking that many people anything is unimaginably extraordinary and says volumes about this social dynamic. It speaks volumes. And the reason for this is because the utmost thing in the mind of most people, and I will say this is true for both men and women, but it's overwhelmingly the case for the conditioned woman in society, and everybody will make excuses for this, and they'll have justifications, till the end of time, because they won't want to look at this dynamic honestly. They won't want to look at it honestly. what this means, what this says societally, is going on psychologically within the minds of the vast, overwhelming majority of socially conditioned, socially engineered females. What they are saying is, my value system is based in money. Get as offended about it as you want. I don't care what anybody says about that. It's the truth. That is what that dynamic is saying psychologically. Now, let me ask the listeners out there this question, okay? Could you pose a hypothetical reason for me to contemplate and for the other listeners to contemplate? Could anybody out there tell me why the first question that does not come up in conversation between a man and a woman interacting socially in our society, that the woman would ask to the man, or that the man would ask to the woman for that matter, is, do you know the difference between right and wrong behavior definitively? Or in other words, are you a truly moral being? Why isn't that the first question that's asked? Why isn't that the first question that's asked, ladies and gentlemen? Want to know why? Because most people don't give a damn about that. At all. At all. That's why. That's the truth. I don't need anybody to hypothetically answer the question. I know what the answer to the question is. Because their values aren't based in anything that is a real value. It's based on an illusion called garbage, nonsense, fake fiat money. That is nothing but a control system for the mind and behaviors and emotions. And I guarantee you we'll get tons of excuses and tons of justifications about that. You know, I'm a misogynist for bringing that up. Don't you know? You know? It's because money is the value system that they have been taught, and that's the value system they've retained. Morals? Oh, who gives a damn? I don't need to know anything about that, you know? Do you condone or support violence against other people by your support of the state? No, I don't need to know anything about that. Because invariably 99.9% of these people all do support the state. They're statists. Now, here's my question, folks. Let's get to the underlying psychological factor that's going on there. Let's get to the underlying psychological causal agent, the causal factor of what's taking place in the manipulated, conditioned female psyche. Again, folks, one of the things I want to re-emphasize that I talked about last week is we have to understand that this is not human nature. And many men are absolutely just as brainwashed and conditioned and mind-controlled and socially engineered. My contention would be that more men are out of that conditioning than women are, by a small percentage. But we have to get to the underlying psychological reasons for this. We'll pick this up on the other side. You know, we've pretty much struck a nerve when it comes to the dynamic that I'm talking about regarding neo-feminism and the socially conditioned mindset of the overwhelmingly vast majority of women in our society, and the value system that really shows that most people are in, which is no values at all. You know, it's the worship of money, and moreover than that, it's deeply beyond that, because we have to get past just the symptoms and understand what the underlying social psychological factors that are really going on in most people's minds, okay, especially the female mind, which is part of an overwhelmingly important part of what perpetuates statism in our society and perpetuates everything that goes along with statism, which is the continued condoning of violence and oppression and slavery in our world. And I'm going to put out there the argument that the overwhelming mass of females in our society want that to continue. They love the state. They cannot get enough of it. And I'm not saying that most men aren't statists as well, because they most certainly are. But I'm saying it's almost entirely has a hold over women's minds, as opposed to men who seem to be coming out of the statist mindset a lot faster. I know that's a controversial statement to make, but look, the numbers are there in the observation. Just go out and look at who's out there telling the truth about statism as being a complete illusion. How many men are doing that versus how many women are doing that? I mean, I don't think anybody would call into this show or try to debate at all anywhere that the overwhelming numbers of people involved in the truth movement are men. The ratio is wildly skewed. If I had to guess, I would say it's a minimum of 10 to 1. And I'm probably being extraordinarily generous in that estimation. I'd say more likely than not, it's actually closer to 20 to 1. You know, which it speaks volumes. All you have to do is go out in any group of activists and observe. And I'm talking about for, like, you know, really things that are anti the state. Of course, there are activist groups that are comprised largely of women. I'm talking when it comes down to telling the real truth about this entire corrupt, immoral system. Because most women gain benefit from that system from being in place and want it to continue. They don't want the state to come down. It's why the state is constantly, you know, trying to justify their existence in their minds and tell them how much they need them, because it is like the state's trying to prop itself up as the actual real masculine man image, you know, and say, you need us. And here's the underlying psychological dynamic that I'm talking about. What are we really talking about, folks? Why does a woman in a first interaction with a male ask the question, what do you do for a living? What's being actively sought psychologically? What are they revealing about their condition that they're in? You know, just let me just say this as an aside. Do you know there are people who I know and have known for years that I still don't know what they do, quote, for a living? I hate that term. What do you do for a living? As if you wouldn't be able to live without doing this, you know? As if somehow all of life is dependent on the flow of money and whether you're in some corporate slave job. I hate the term, what do you do for a living? For a living. What do I do for the fake garbage Federal Reserve notes that people so believe in as a religion? As a false religion? That morons believe in as a false religion? You know? So, I lost my train of thought there. I was saying, you know, the underlying psychological dynamic that, you know, is going on here. And how wildly, you know, skewed truth telling is in the truth movement, and you know, the ratio that exists between men and women. This dynamic of, you know, what do you do for a living? Where is that coming from? You know, I mean, I would never. I was saying I'd never. There are people who I know who I have never even asked that question to. I've never posed the question to actual friends that I have, people that I've known for years. I've actually gone up to him and said, how long have I known you? And someone replied to me, oh, about 5 or 6 years now, it's got to be. And I said, I have no idea what type of job you do during the day at all. Never asked them one time, because I don't care about that. Why would I care about what fake nonsense that someone is made to go through, is coerced really to go through, okay, by this society to make, absolutely fake nonsense money that isn't backed by any real intrinsic value whatsoever? Why would I care what someone who's in the same basic slavery position as I'm in when it comes to having to have an amount of that dynamic in your life to be able to just get any food or services at all? Okay? And why would that be somehow determining what how I interact with that person? I'm not concerned about what somebody does for their job at all in any way, because that's not what makes somebody a person I want to know or not at all in any way. I honestly don't care what they do, as long as I know that they're a good person and they're fighting the good fight of freedom and getting involved in doing the great work in some capacity. That's what I care about. I want to know whether someone's awake. I want to know whether someone knows what's going on in the world. I want to know whether someone is conscious. I want to know whether someone cares about what's going on in the world. Not how many fake Federal Reserve notes they can accrue. There are people in my life who I've known for years I've never even posed the question to. I don't know what they do, and I don't even want to know. And yet this is the first and foremost things on the minds of most people. Because what they are trying to get at is, how much money do you make? And that there's a reason for that. Psychologically, what's going on in their mind? Now, I want to go to another caller and ask them this question. Okay? So I'm going to go back to the phone lines and I'm going to bring somebody else on, and I want them to try to answer the question, what psychologically is going on in the minds of someone who poses a question, the first question they ask somebody else, because they think there might be, some kind of interaction or attraction or whatever, and, in pursuing some sort of any kind of a relationship, the first thing that they want to know is, what do you do for a living? Okay? I want to know the psychological dynamic that is taking place there.